You know the images, don't you? The majestic Parthenon, philosophers like Socrates debating in the bustling agora, epic heroes like Heracles battling mythical beasts, and maybe that clash of Spartan shields.
Yeah, those are definitely the iconic snapshots we tend to think of.
Exactly. These are the moments we associate with ancient Greece. But what if we told you the story runs far deeper? I mean, like stretching back millennia before these moments.
hmm Through eras of myth, these mysterious Bronze Age palaces, centuries of, well, quieter transformation, and then these profound changes that laid the very foundations of Western civilization.
So today we're taking a deep dive, a really deep one, into the entire story of ancient Greece.
We've gathered a pretty rich tapestry of historical accounts and scholarship. The idea is to distill the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight for you,
Yeah, our mission is basically to guide you through its complex, fascinating history, right from its purely mythological beginnings all the way to its enduring legacy.
helping you understand not just what happened, but why it truly mattered and, how its influence continues to shape our world today. It's a huge story.
Get ready for, hopefully, a shortcut to being truly well-informed. We'll pack it with surprising facts, those aha moments, and try to keep a pace that respects your time, ensuring you gain knowledge quickly but thoroughly.
So let's unearth this incredible journey together.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. The real beginning. The Greek understanding of the world and, their place within it didn't begin with historical records or archaeological digs like we might expect.
No, not at all. Instead, it started with these incredibly powerful mythological narratives.
And these weren't simply bedtime stories or like just entertaining tales,
Yeah,
right? They were the actual cultural bedrock, the earliest framework for understanding reality itself.
absolutely. They provided explanations for the origins of the cosmos, the place of humanity within that vast order, and the nature of the divine. You could almost say these myths, in a fundamental sense, were the first foundations.
The foundations upon which everything else in Greece civilization would later be built.
That's a crucial point. What's truly fascinating is how these narratives offered a complete worldview. They weren't just fun stories, they were profoundly explanatory.
Right, offering insights into everything from natural phenomena like why there's thunder to the intricacies of human social
Ah,
institutions.
And the Greeks had a really unique perspective on their deities. Unlike some other ancient cultures, they didn't necessarily see their gods as perfect or morally flawless.
No, not at all. The Olympians exhibited human traits, just magnified to divine proportions. Think about it.
Yeah, jealousy, lust, anger, compassion, wisdom, folly, all of it
Yeah.
played out on this epic immortal scale.
It's quite traumatic, and this complex web of divine relationships with all its, squabbles and alliances, it kind of uncannily mirrored human social structures.
It really did.
And it all began with chaos, didn't it? When the Greeks thought about how everything started, it wasn't some single, all-powerful creator figure.
No, it was this primordial concept of chaos. But it wasn't just like messy disorder. It was more like a yawning void, a formless expanse of nothingness.
Wow. Can you imagine that kind of primordial emptiness? From this vast, formless nothingness emerged Gaia, Earth, the very first being solid, eternal, the foundation of everything that followed.
hmm And in a truly epic start to creation, Gaia then spontaneously produced Uranus, the sky, to cover her.
Along with the mountains to crown her and Pontus, the sea, to encircle her shores, it paints such a vivid, almost primal picture of the world just taking shape.
Absolutely. And from the union of Gaia and Uranus came the powerful Titans, 12 formidable deities, huge strength, huge stature.
And among them was Cronus, the youngest and apparently the most cunning.
Right. And Uranus, in a sort of classic display of paternal fear and paranoia, dreaded that his children might one day overthrow him. It's a recurring theme.
So what did he do? He imprisoned them.
Exactly. Within Gaia herself, causing her immense pain. This act of fear and imprisonment immediately sets up the first major power struggle in Greek mythology.
So Gaia, suffering beneath the weight of her imprisoned children, naturally sought revenge. She crafted this great curved adamantine sickle, powerful stuff, and entrusted it to Cronus.
Right. And Cronus, using this sickle in a truly dramatic and, frankly, gruesome act, castrated his father, Uranus.
It's an incredibly visceral origin story, but what's really interesting are the beings that sprung forth from Uranus's spilled blood,
Yeah, you get the Erides, also known as the Furies, these sort of terrifying agents of vengeance.
along with the monstrous giants and the Meliae, who are ash tree nymphs.
And then, from the sea foam generated by his severed genitals.
Arose Aphrodite, the radiant goddess of love and beauty. So you have this raw, primal violence leading directly to the birth of something as sublime as beauty itself. It's a fascinating duality.
Precisely. So, following this cosmic upheaval, Cronus assumes rulership of the cosmos, taking his sister Rhea as his consort. However, as you hinted, the cycle of fear and usurpation just continued.
Like father, like son, almost.
Pretty much. Just like his father before him, Cronus feared being overthrown by his own children. There was a prophecy, you see, that foretold his downfall.
Ah, the classic prophecy.
Always a prophecy. So this led him to swallow each child. Rhea bore Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon as soon as they were born. Just gone.
Horrifying. But Rhea, desperate to save at least one offspring, managed to deceive Cronus when Zeus was born.
She did. She wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes, which Cronus swallowed instead, thinking it was the baby. This allowed Zeus to be secretly raised on the island of Crete. It's the ultimate hidden hero trope, isn't it?
It truly is, and it sets the stage perfectly for the next major cosmic conflict. Upon reaching maturity, Zeus, apparently aided by a potion from Metis, forced Cronus to disgorge his siblings.
Who burst forth fully grown. Imagine that reunion.
Right. So with his brothers and sisters finally free, Zeus led them in this decadal-long war against the Titans, the Titanomachy.
And this wasn't just a family squabble. It was a universe-altering cosmic war for dominion. The younger gods, the Olympians, were aided by powerful allies,
Like the hundred-handed ones and the Cyclops.
whom Zeus had wisely freed from Tartarus, the deepest region of the underworld. Smart move.
Yeah. After years of brutal fighting, the Olympians eventually triumphed. The defeated Titans were then imprisoned down in Tartarus.
And the cosmos came under the decisive rule of Zeus and his siblings, now firmly established as the Olympians, a new world order.
Following their momentous victory, the Olympian gods established this rigid divine hierarchy that would govern the cosmos.
Right. Zeus, as the victor, naturally claimed dominion over the sky. He became the undisputed king of the gods, wielding that formidable thunderbolt crafted for him by the Cyclops.
His brother Poseidon received authority over the seas, rivers, earthquakes, basically all the waters.
While Hades was given rule of the underworld and the dead. So these three brothers essentially divided the world between them. An epic division of power.
And their sisters took on crucial roles too, right?
Absolutely. Hera became Zeus's wife and queen, presiding over marriage and childbirth, though the relationship was famously stormy.
Uh-huh. Demeter governed agriculture and the harvest, crucial for human survival.
And Hestia attended the sacred hearth, representing the enduring center of domestic life and religious sacrifice. A quieter but vital role.
And the rest of the Olympian family quickly filled out the roster, each adding a distinct flavor to this divine tapestry. You had Athena,
who sprang fully formed and armored from Zeus's head. Goddess of wisdom, strategic warfare. Very formidable.
Then Apollo, god of light, music, prophecy, healing, often seen with his lyre, a very cultured god.
His twin sister, Artemis, roamed the wilderness as the goddess of the hunt and protector of young women, fiercely independent.
Ares presided over the brutal and chaotic aspects of warfare, a stark contrast to Athena's more strategic approach.
Aphrodite, of course, radiated love, beauty, and desire, often said to be born from that sea foam we mentioned earlier.
Hephaestus, the divine craftsman, mastered fire and metallurgy, known for his incredible inventions, though often portrayed as lame.
Hermes served as the swift messenger of the gods, a guide to travelers, merchants, and even the recently deceased. Very busy.
And Dionysus became the exuberant god of wine, festivity, theater, and ecstatic release. The life of the party, maybe.
You could say that. So each had their own distinct domain, their own unique symbols and sacred animals.
Yeah, and their complex relationships, their endless conflicts, their shifting alliances. They really mirrored human social structures, didn't they?
They absolutely did. They weren't just characters. They provided the explanatory narratives for both natural phenomena and the very social institutions the Greeks lived by.
These gods, with all their human-like flaws, jealousy, lust, anger, compassion, wisdom, folly, but on a grand divine scale, made them incredibly relatable despite their immortality.
It's a profound reflection of humanity, just projected onto a cosmic stage.
Okay, so moving on from the gods themselves, let's unpack humanity's origins, which in Greek mythology are just inextricably linked to the figure of Prometheus.
Right, a Titan who interestingly sided with Zeus during the Titanomachy, going against his own kind.
According to the poet Hesiod, Prometheus was the one who actually formed humans from clay, with Athena breathing life into these creations.
hmm And Prometheus, it seems, was more than just a creator. He was a true champion and patron of mortals, always seeking to elevate their condition, to help them out.
His role as humanity's advocate is absolutely central to understanding Greek self-perception, how they saw themselves in relation to the gods.
Definitely. When Zeus established the practice of sacrifice, requiring humans to honor the gods with a portion of their food, Prometheus devised this really clever scheme to favor mortals.
The trick with the bull, right.
Exactly. He artfully divided a sacrificial bull into two portions. One had the valuable meat hidden beneath, unappetizing oxhide. The other had the bones concealed beneath glistening fat.
Looked good on the outside.
Appeared tempting. So Zeus, given the choice, unknowingly selected the seemingly appealing portion of fat-covered bones,
Oops.
and inadvertently established the tradition of humans sacrificing just the bones and fat to the gods while keeping the valuable meat for themselves. It was a brilliant, almost mischievous act of defiance.
You can just imagine Zeus's white-hot rage at being outsmarted. Enraged by this deception, Zeus retaliated by withholding fire from humanity.
Left them cold, unable to cook food or develop any real technology. A harsh punishment.
But Prometheus, unwilling to see his creation suffer, defiantly stole fire from the gods, maybe from Hephaestus's forge, maybe from the sun itself, and delivered it to humans hidden in a hollow fennel stalk.
That single act of defiance fundamentally changed humanity's trajectory. It propelled them towards civilization, towards progress. A huge gift.
But it earned Prometheus Zeus's eternal wrath. Zeus ordered him chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains.
Where an eagle would daily devour his liver. And because he was immortal, the liver would regenerate each night, ensuring eternal torment. Just awful.
It's a horrific punishment, a testament to Zeus's unyielding anger. Centuries later, we hear of Heracles freeing Prometheus during his famous labors, but the punishment itself is legendary.
But Zeus's punishment wasn't limited to Prometheus alone. He aimed to punish humanity as well.
Right, Pandora.
Exactly. He instructed Hephaestus to create Pandora, the first woman. She was endowed with gifts from various gods, beauty, persuasiveness, skill in crafts, but also, crucially, curiosity and deceit. A mixed bag.
She was then sent to Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother, carrying a sealed jar.
And despite Prometheus's earlier, very clear warning against accepting any gifts from Zeus.
Epimetheus, whose name means afterthought, unfortunately welcomed Pandora, didn't think it through.
Nope. And eventually Pandora, driven by her innate curiosity, simply couldn't resist. She opened the jar, often mistranslated as a box in later retellings.
Releasing all manner of evils, diseases, and hardships into the world. It's a foundational myth for understanding Greek views on suffering and the human condition.
The interesting twist, though, the glimmer of hope in this otherwise bleak story, is that only hope remained trapped inside.
Explaining both humanity's suffering and its enduring capacity for optimism despite adversity, that's a powerful message, don't you think?
Right.
That even in the face of all evil, hope endures.
Absolutely, it adds a layer of complexity. And this leads us directly to Hesiod's works and Days, which presents this narrative of gradual human decline through 5 successive ages.
It's a rather pessimistic view, to your point, but one that simultaneously exalts their heroic past, a way of looking back.
Definitely. The first humans lived during the Golden Age under Cronos' benevolent rule. This was portrayed as a time of perfect harmony.
Abundance without labor, absolute peace. Humans lived almost like gods, free from suffering, aging gradually without infirmity, and passing peacefully into the afterlife.
Their souls, in fact, were believed to become benevolent spirits watching over later generations. Sounds pretty idyllic, doesn't it? A true paradise.
A stark contrast to what followed. The Silver Age, beginning under Zeus's reign, produced a markedly inferior humanity.
These childlike beings remained with their mothers for 100 years, and upon reaching adulthood, lived only briefly in foolish discord before dying. Crucially, they refused to honor the gods.
A significant moral failing in the Greek view. After their deaths, their souls became blessed underworld spirits, but sort of second tier compared to the Golden Age folks.
Then came the Bronze Age. This era was populated by a warlike race said to be created from ash trees who were obsessed with violence and might.
Everything was bronze, tools, weapons, even their houses. They eventually destroyed themselves through constant warfare and descended unnamed into Hades. A truly self-destructive era.
The Heroic Age, however, represented the only upward trend in this otherwise degenerative sequence. This era produced the great heroes of myth.
The ones who fought at Thebes and Troy. These demigods, superior to those of the Bronze Age in justice and virtue, achieved truly great deeds before meeting their fates.
And the worthiest among them were transported to the Isles of the Blessed, a paradise ruled by Cronus. This age served as a nostalgic bridge, a connection to a more glorious past for later Greeks.
And finally, we arrive at Hesiod's own time, the Iron Age. This was described as an era of constant labor, suffering, dishonor, and profound moral decay.
Yeah, in this fallen state, children dishonored parents, brothers fought brothers, oaths and justice lost significance, replaced by might and treachery. Just a grim picture.
Hesiod, in his despair, predicted this age would end when humans were born with gray hair at their temples, signaling Zeus's destruction of this race as well.
This myth, you see, isn't just a timeline. It profoundly reinforces Greek pessimism about moral progress while simultaneously exalting their heroic past.
It essentially positioned contemporary Greeks as descendants of a superior ancestry to which they must aspire, despite the seemingly inevitable decline. It's a fascinating psychological coping mechanism, almost.
It really is, allowing them to mourn a lost golden age while still holding onto the dignity of their heroic past. And the mythic age truly reached its zenith in the stories of these heroes mortals of extraordinary ability, often semi-divine.
Who exemplified Greek virtues and established the paradigms of heroic achievement. These were the figures who performed impossible feats and literally shaped the landscape of their world.
Heracles, known to Romans as Hercules, son of Zeus, and the mortal woman Alcmene, truly embodied physical strength and endurance like no other.
Persecuted from birth by Hera's unrelenting jealousy, he faced his greatest challenge after killing his own children in a fit of madness sent by the vengeful goddess. A terrible tragedy.
Awful. As atonement, he was commanded to perform 12 seemingly impossible labors. Think of it, slaying the monstrous Nemean lion or the multi-headed Lernaean hydra.
Where cutting one head led to two more growing back, or capturing the fearsome Cerberus from the underworld itself.
Through these labors, Heracles journeyed across the known world and beyond, establishing his reputation as the greatest of heroes. His apotheosis, his transformation into a god upon his death, represented the highest achievement possible for a mortal.
Showing that immense struggle could lead to divine reward. Then there's Perseus, son of Zeus and Danae, who embodied cunning and divine favor more than just brute strength.
Right. His grandfather, Acrisius, fearing that prophecy that his grandson would kill him, tragically cast mother and child adrift in a wooden chest. Talk about family drama.
Seriously, years later, Perseus was sent on what seemed a suicide mission. Bring back the head of Medusa, whose gaze turned men to stone.
But he got help. Aided by Athena and Hermes, who provided him with winged sandals for flight, a reflective shield to avoid Medusa's gaze, a curved sword, a cap of invisibility, and a special sack.
Quite the kit.
Yeah, fully equipped. Perseus beheaded Medusa as she slept, and from her severed neck sprang Pegasus, the winged horse.
On his return journey, Perseus famously rescued Andromeda from a sea monster and, accidentally fulfilled the prophecy by killing his grandfather with a stray disgust during athletic games. Oops.
His story really emphasizes divine aid and cleverness over brute force, a different kind of hero.
Theseus is another hero who really resonates with Athens' civic ideals. He represents heroism in service to civilization itself.
Son of Aegeus, or possibly Poseidon and Aethra, he journeyed from Troezen to Athens, bravely defeating bandits and monsters along the way, clearing the road for safe travel, making the world safer.
In Athens, he volunteered to join the tribute of 14 youths sent to Crete, destined to be devoured by the monstrous Minotaur in the infamous labyrinth.
With the help of Minos' daughter Ariadne and her legendary ball of thread, Theseus navigated the labyrinth, slew the Minotaur, and led the Athenian youths to freedom. A classic escape story.
He returned to Athens, where he eventually became king, unified Attica under Athenian governance, instituted democratic reforms, established religious festivals.
Making him both monster slayer and civilization builder. He's a remarkable blend of mythical hero and civic pioneer, very important for Athens' self-image.
And of course, Jason. He led the Argonauts, this all-star team of Greece's greatest heroes, including Heracles, Orpheus, the Dioscuri,
on the perilous quest for the Golden Fleece. This seemingly impossible mission was a precondition for reclaiming his birthright from his uncle Peleus, who had usurped the throne of Iolcus.
With a ship built by Argus under Athena's guidance, the Argo, the heroes undertook this perilous voyage across the Black Sea to Colchis.
Overcoming numerous obstacles through combined strength, skill, and crucial divine assistance. Teamwork makes the dream work, I guess.
In Colchis, King Aedes set impossible tasks for Jason, who succeeded only with the invaluable help from the king's daughter, the sorceress Medea, who had fallen deeply in love with him.
Which had its own complicated consequences later on. Jason's story highlights leadership, collective action, but also the dangers of relying on external, perhaps unpredictable aid.
So when you look at all these heroes and their stories, what does this all mean for the Greeks themselves?
Well, these weren't just ancient bedtime tales. They were profound narratives. They taught essential values, explored the depths of human nature, and offered archetypes for leadership and civic duty.
You have to think about how these mythic journeys, these grand tales of overcoming impossible odds, might have actually inspired the real-world explorations and political innovations that followed later.
Absolutely. They provided fundamental answers about identity, about what virtue meant, and about humanity's very purpose. They were truly foundational.
Indeed. And as the mists of mythology gradually clear, archaeological evidence begins to reveal the first complex societies that truly flourished in the ancient world.
Laying the groundwork for everything that came after. It's the shift from the imagined past to the tangible one, the one we can dig up.
Right. Into the Bronze Age. So moving from the purely mythic, we enter the Age and Bronze Age. From the dawn of the third millennium to the final century of the second millennium BCE, this era saw incredibly sophisticated civilizations rise and fall.
They established vital trade networks, distinctive architectural styles, and complex civil structures that would profoundly influence later Greek culture.
It's truly where the story of organized society in Greece really begins. On the ground, so to speak.
That's right. The Ancient Bronze Age flowered later than its counterparts in Egypt and Mesopotamia, but it developed these distinctive cultures, unique technological innovations, artistic styles, complex social structures.
And their geographic positioning was a key factor in this development, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Situated right where three continents meet, Europe, Asia, and Africa, these early societies truly thrived through maritime connections.
The distinctive geography of the Aegean, a terrain dotted with islands, peninsulas, intricate coastlines, made seafaring not just convenient, but absolutely necessary and natural for communication and survival. You had to be good on the water.
Maritime trade, therefore, became the lifeblood of these societies. It allowed them to overcome the inherent constraints of mountainous terrain and limited farmland.
Bringing in essential resources and luxury goods they couldn't produce themselves.
Exactly. Their trade routes gradually reached across the Mediterranean and even beyond, linking Aegean settlements with older, established civilizations like the Egyptians, Levantine cultures, Anatolian kingdoms.
This interconnectedness was vital for their technological and cultural development. It brought in new ideas, new materials.
And a truly transformative development occurred in the early third millennium, the widespread introduction of bronze technology.
Right, the alloy of copper and tin. Game changer.
Huge game changer. This provided durable tools and weapons that revolutionized agriculture, craftsmanship, warfare. Metallurgical expertise became incredibly valuable.
Control over metal resources conferred significant economic and political power on those who mastered it.
And bronze technology also stimulated long-distance trade because tin, a crucial component, was scarce in the Aegean. It had to be imported from distant sources like Britain or maybe even Afghanistan.
Wow. So it linked these nascent civilizations to a wider, truly global ancient world, even back then.
This era essentially established Greece as a vibrant crossroads of trade and culture. It highlights the profound impact of geography on societal development and how technological innovation can act as a catalyst for political and economic change. It's foundational.
Within this era, two major civilizations particularly dominated the Aegean Bronze Age. The sophisticated Minoans of Crete,
And the more martial Mycenaeans of mainland Greece.
while connected through trade and cultural exchange, they developed distinct social structures, artistic styles, political systems.
That would exert varying degrees of influence on later Greek culture. Let's start with the Minoans.
Okay, this civilization first appeared on Crete in the early 3rd millennium BCE, and by the 2nd millennium had blossomed into an incredibly sophisticated maritime society.
One that would dominate the Aegean until the 15th century BCE. Modern archaeologists named it after the mythical king Minos, recognizing it as the first advanced civilization on European soil. Pretty impressive claim.
What immediately stands out about the Minoans, you mentioned this earlier, is the absence of defensive walls around major Minoan settlements.
Yeah, it suggests a relatively peaceful society, one that felt secure in its maritime power. a significant contrast to later mainland cultures, which were almost always heavily fortified.
Gives us a sense of a people focused on trade and prosperity rather than constant conflict.
Seems that way. At the heart of Minoan civilization stood their impressive talus complexes, most notably at Knossos, Phaistos, Malea, and Zakros.
These weren't just royal residences, though, right? They were truly multifunctional centers, integrating administrative, religious, storage, production facilities, all under one roof, basically.
Exactly. They were architectural marvels, featuring sophisticated elements like multiple stories, light wells that brought natural light deep into the structures.
Elaborate drainage systems, and even indoor plumbing that was so advanced it would not be equaled in Europe for thousands of years. That's incredible.
It really is. The largest palace at Knossos, spanning nearly 5 acres with hundreds of rooms arranged around a central courtyard, was so complex in its layout.
That it likely inspired the Greek myth of the labyrinth. You can see why.
Totally. It included vast workshops, storage magazines filled with massive clay jars, pithoi for olive oil and grain, audience chambers, residential quarters, all indicating a highly organized society.
And the vibrant frescoes that adorn the walls of these palaces are just stunning, a window into their culture.
Oh yeah. They depict scenes of nature, religious ceremonies, athletic events, including the famous bull leaping ritual.
Where acrobats perform these dangerous feats with bulls, suggests a deep connection to nature, maybe a unique religious practice.
Possibly. Minoan society certainly developed a hierarchical structure centered on these palaces, and their religious practices likely focused on nature cycles, fertility, and possibly a prominent mother goddess concept, though it's hard to be certain.
The Minoans also developed their own scripts, first Cretan hieroglyphic and later Linear A, often found on clay tablets or seals recording economic transactions.
However, here's where we hit a bit of a historical mystery. The script defies full translation.
Still, after all this time,
Still, this creates a linguistic barrier to a deeper understanding of Minoan politics and law. We can decipher some words, mostly names and commodities, but not full sentences.
Still, the mere presence of a writing system points to a high degree of social complexity, right? Administrators coordinating storage, distribution, maybe extensive trade.
Absolutely. We know they were highly organized, even if we can't read all their records.
Now, the decline of Minoan power, that's a subject of much debate.
It is. Around 1628 BCE, the volcanic island of Thera, modern Santorini, erupted catastrophically, sent ash and tsunamis towards Crete.
A massive natural disaster. Did that finish them off?
Well, some scholars believe it economically weakened them, destabilized their society, but others point out that Minoan palaces continued functioning for at least a generation afterward.
So the impact wasn't immediately fatal.
Seems not.
Yeah.
Earthquakes may have compounded the damage over time. Ultimately, a series of destructive events, fires, maybe invasions or internal conflicts, decimated most palaces between 1500 and 1450 BCE.
Only Knossos endured.
Only Knossos endured for a while, but it began showing clear signs of Mycenaean influence. Linear B script, the Mycenaean writing system, starts appearing on its clay tablets.
Indicating new rulers, likely from the mainland.
Almost certainly. By 1400 BCE, Minoan civilization had largely given way to Mycenaean dominance on Crete.
Despite their eventual downfall, Minoan achievements had a truly lasting impact. Their palatial architecture, for instance,
Served as a fundamental model for the later Mycenaean centers. They learned a lot from the Minoans.
the maritime trade networks they established remained active, and Minoan motifs and artistic styles influenced pottery across the Greek mainland for a long time.
Even the legendary labyrinth and those bull-centered rituals found echoes in the later Greek myth of the Minotaur, kept alive for centuries in epic storytelling.
So the Minoans created this advanced, seemingly peaceful society, but their power was ultimately vulnerable to both natural disasters and the rising militaristic culture of the mainland.
And that's where the Mycenaean civilization comes in. A stark contrast to the Minoans, even while influenced by them, flourishing on mainland Greece.
This culture, taking its name from the site of Mycenae, became the first advanced culture dominated by Greek-speaking peoples.
Gradually extending its influence across the entire Aegean world from around 1600 to 1100 BCE, they represent a different spirit altogether, more warlike.
Definitely. Unlike the apparently peaceful Minoans, Mycenaean society exhibited a stronger martial character. Their settlements were built to be formidable.
Heavily fortified citadels built on easily defensible hills, like those found at Mycenaean Tiryns. These strongholds featured massive stone walls.
Constructed of such large blocks that later Greeks, in awe of their scale, attributed them to the mythical Cyclops. You can see them today, they're incredible.
The Lion Gate at Mycenae, with its relief sculpture of two lionesses flanking a column, remains an incredibly impressive example of their monumental architecture and defensive prowess, still guarding the citadel entrance.
Mycenaean palaces also followed a different architectural pattern from their Minoan counterparts. They centered on the megaron.
Right, a rectangular hall with a central hearth surrounded by columns and access through a porch with columns, a very specific layout.
And this specific architectural form would later influence the development of Greek temple architecture, demonstrating a clear line of cultural transmission.
These palaces served as administrative centers, seats of royal power for a ruling elite, and redistribution hubs for agricultural products and manufactured goods, centers of power.
The social hierarchy appears to have been much more rigid in Mycenaean society than in Minoan Crete. At the very top stood the one-ax.
A king who combined military, political, and religious authority, almost like a priest-king figure, combining spiritual and secular power, quite different from what we see later in Athens.
Beneath him, a powerful warrior aristocracy controlled the wealth and power.
And linear B tablets, that early form of Greek used primarily for administrative purposes, reveal significant palatial control over the economy.
Detailed inventories of goods, personnel, production quotas, real bureaucratic control.
Exactly. The Mycenaean elite demonstrated their status through conspicuous wealth and military prowess, as evidenced by the spectacular gold burial masks and weapons found in the shaft graves at Mycenae.
And of course, we can't discuss the Mycenaeans without mentioning the Trojan War.
The legendary conflict, deeply embedded in Greek mythology, supposedly waged against the city of Troy by the Greeks after Paris of Troy took Helen from Menelaus, the king of Sparta.
It's one of the most important and evocative events in Greek mythology, featuring legendary figures like Achilles and Hector, the ultimate epic narrative of their heroic past.
The story is famously told through Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, which are thought to be works of Greek mythology rather than history.
For centuries, the very existence of Troy and the siege itself was heavily debated, right? Until archaeological discoveries by people like Heinrich Schliemann suggested a historical basis.
Right. But regardless of their exact historicity, these two books are very important texts. They've been compared to the Bible for the Greek people.
Offering a glimpse into an ancient story rather than a historical account of a grand Mycenaean past, they shaped Greek identity for millennia.
Despite their power and apparent stability, the Mycenaean civilization suffered this widespread and rather sudden collapse around 1200 BCE.
Part of that bigger Bronze Age collapse affecting civilizations across the Eastern Mediterranean. The Hittite Empire vanished.
Egyptian records mention raids by mysterious sea peoples. Mycenaean palaces experienced repeated destruction and abandonment. Major upheaval.
For Mycenaean Greece, it meant the decline of palace economies, the disappearance of linear B, and widespread social disruption.
Palaces were burned down or gradually abandoned. Long-distance trade slowed dramatically, and complex administrative systems simply vanished, gone.
Why did this happen? That's still a question debated fiercely by historians and archaeologists.
Theories vary widely. Some argue internal revolt against palace elites destabilized entire regions.
Others blame foreign invasions. Dorians, maybe. The sea peoples.
Could be. Climatic shifts, perhaps prolonged droughts or a series of devastating earthquakes, may have also played a significant role, exacerbating economic crisis, making societies more vulnerable.
Hard to pin down one single cause.
Very likely a combination of factors. In any case, by 1100 BCE, the grand Mycenaean centers were gone or drastically reduced. The once thriving trade routes slowed or stopped. Cultural fragmentation, isolation set in.
Yet, despite the collapse, the Mycenaean legacy endured. How?
In powerful oral tradition, stories of great heroes, of golden masks, of walled citadels like those at Mycenae itself, fed into the epic cycles that bards would later recite during the Greek Dark Ages.
These oral traditions, passed down through generations, eventually formed the very basis of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, kept the memory alive.
Exactly. Even the archaeological remnants, like the Lion Gate or the Cyclopean walls of Tiryns, became visible symbols of a lost grandeur, inspiring awe and mystery for later Greeks.
So you have this powerful warrior society, the Mycenaeans, whose sudden collapse left a profound void. Yet their legends, their stories of heroism and glory, would persist, shaping Greek identity for centuries to come.
And this, in turn, brings us to our next segment. Imagine what happens when such grand civilizations simply vanish. It's here, in the shadows of that collapse, that something truly transformative begins to brew.
The Greek Dark Ages. Sounds ominous, but maybe not just a time of loss.
Not just loss, a crucible where elements of what would become distinctively Greek culture truly began to take shape.
So the Greek Dark Ages, roughly 1100 to 800 BCE, after the Bronze Age collapse, Greece enters this period of, well, material regression and depopulation.
But it's also a crucial bridge, a time during which new social and cultural patterns emerged, laying the foundations for the archaic age that followed.
This period, often overlooked, was far from static. Though maybe marked by material regression, it helped lay the crucial foundations for a new Greek world.
That's right. The very break from centralized, palace-centered rule allowed smaller communities to experiment with governance.
And those vital oral epics we mentioned captured a heroic past that would unite future generations under shared mythic narratives, even in this time of, well, obscurity.
The socio-political landscape certainly underwent a profound transformation with the disintegration of the palatial systems.
Yeah, leading to significant depopulation in the once prosperous Mycenaean centers. Trade routes dwindled dramatically.
Artistic and architectural endeavors saw a sharp decline, making way for simpler, more rudimentary forms compared to the Bronze Age splendor. It's almost like a reset.
Politically, authority likely devolved to local chieftains known as basilis.
Right. These individuals combined military leadership with religious and judicial functions within their immediate communities, commanding smaller territories, fewer resources than their Mycenaean predecessors.
Without the complex writing systems or bureaucracies of the palace cultures, governance became more personal and direct.
Based on kinship ties and face-to-face relationships, rather than distant institutional structures, a very human-scale form of leadership.
And society during this period seems to have organized itself around small, relatively egalitarian communities, typically related families or clans.
The rigid social stratification evident in Mycenaean records gave way to more fluid arrangements, though distinctions between elite warrior families and commoners certainly persisted.
Local customs and practices gained immense importance, contributing directly to the regional variations that would characterize later Greek culture.
And one of the most significant aspects of this period, though, was the disappearance of Linear B. The Mycenaean writing system vanishes.
Marking a profound loss of literacy across the Greek world. Imagine a society suddenly losing its ability to write and keep complex records. That's a massive shift.
It truly is. But despite this material regression and the loss of writing, the Dark Age was not merely a period of loss. In critical ways, it was a crucible.
Where elements of what would become distinctively Greek culture began to take shape.
Most significantly, this period saw the continuing development and regional diversification of the Greek language itself.
So while Linear B recorded an early form of Greek, the Dark Age witnessed linguistic evolution.
Exactly. Leading ultimately to the Greek dialects, Ionic, Doric, Aeolic, Arcado-Cypriot, that would characterize the Greek-speaking world of the historical era.
The absence of a centralized authority or standardized writing system actually allowed these regional variations to flourish. Interesting side effect.
One clear, tangible sign of revival during this period was the widespread adoption and spread of ironwork.
Right, the Iron Age begins here. Iron provided stronger and more accessible tools and weapons than bronze, which was much harder to come by and work with after the trade collapse.
This technological shift helped communities adapt more effectively to agricultural challenges and even local conflicts. It meant a wider segment of the population could access better tools.
Which is a significant social equalizer, potentially.
And it's during this time that the epic poems attributed to Homer, the Iliad and Odyssey, truly preserve memories of this transitional period and the grand Mycenaean past.
Though they would be written down centuries later, they clearly depict a world different from both the Mycenaean palace civilization and the later city-state culture.
Suggesting their deep roots in this powerful oral tradition that miraculously survived the Bronze Age collapse. These oral epics became a shared cultural memory, a unifying force even in fragmented communities.
You can also see subtle signs of revival in the art, especially pottery. By the late 9th and early 8th centuries BCE, pottery styles became more elaborate.
Moving beyond simple designs to feature intricate, geometric patterns of meanders, circles, and zigzags, the geometric period.
And archaeologists also observed a slight increase in grave goods, indicating a slow but steady return to moderate prosperity after centuries of decline.
Agricultural surpluses may have supported denser settlements and the gradual reestablishment of trade networks, albeit on a much smaller scale than in the Mycenaean era. It's like the seeds of a new society slowly germinating.
One of the most significant innovations that truly defined the end of the Dark Age was the reintroduction of writing.
Yes, this came through the adoption of the Phoenician alphabet, which was ingeniously modified by the Greeks to fit their language, crucially adding vowels.
Which the Phoenician script lacked. That was the key innovation.
Absolutely. This transformed communication, enabling more flexible writing than the old syllabic scripts of the Bronze Age, like Linear B.
By around 800 BCE, Greeks had begun using alphabetic writing for simple inscriptions on pottery or stone.
Heralding the eventual resurgence of literacy and record-keeping that would define the archaic and classical periods, this was a massive game-changer.
And crucially, as these small villages evolved, local leadership structures grew more refined and complex.
Communities occupying defensible hilltops or well-positioned harbors could gradually expand their influence over surrounding areas.
Bit by bit, the conditions were set for the emergence of the polis.
A revolutionary new form of political and social organization. This city-state would be characterized by self-governance, vibrant public debate, structured legal systems, a truly novel political experiment.
So this period, for all its obscurity and material limitations, witnessed creative adaptations that would profoundly influence subsequent developments.
The very absence of centralized authority allowed new social and political patterns to emerge. The slow spread of iron technology, combined with the momentous reintroduction of writing,
Were absolutely crucial foundations for the next era, the Archaic Age. It's an understated but absolutely pivotal era.
it really sets the stage.
And that brings us to the dynamic beginnings of the Archaic Age. Things start to really accelerate now.
Okay, so emerging from the shadows of the Dark Age, roughly 800 to 500 BCE, Greek civilization experienced dramatic growth. Innovation across every dimension of society: political, economic, artistic, intellectual, military.
And the most profound development of this era, the true hallmark of this age, was the emergence of the polis, the city-state.
Yes, the polis was truly a new form of political and social organization that would define Greek civilization. It wasn't simply a city, nor merely a state in the modern sense.
It represented a unique community that integrated an urban center, the Astes with its surrounding countryside, the Chora.
And crucially, the citizen body itself, into a unified entity with its own laws, customs, and identity. Each polis functioned as a sovereign state.
Controlling its territory, conducting independent foreign relations, a fiercely independent entity, a true microcosm of Greek identity.
The physical layout of the typical polis perfectly reflected this integrated nature. At its heart stood the Atesti or urban center, almost always built around an elevated, defensible location called the Acropolis.
Originally serving primarily as a refuge during attacks, the Acropolis gradually acquired profound religious significance, becoming the site of important temples and shrines.
Below it developed the Agora, an open space that functioned as a bustling marketplace, a vibrant political gathering place for public debate, and a crucial social center, the heart of public life.
Surrounding the urban core lay the Chora, or countryside, which provided the essential agricultural land for the community's subsistence.
This truly integrated town and country into a single political entity, making the citizen intimately connected to both the urban and rural aspects of their home.
Despite their fierce independence and diverse regional origins, the emerging polis recognized their participation in a common Hellenic culture. This shared identity was defined by four key elements.
Firstly, a common language. All communities speaking Greek, despite dialectical variations.
Secondly, a common religion. Shared gods, shared festival practices.
Thirdly, a claimed common descent. Most communities tracing their connection back to those mythical Hellenic tribes.
And fourthly, a distinctive lifestyle. Customs surrounding athletics, symposia, civic participation that clearly distinguished Greeks from non-Greeks, whom they often called barbarians.
The scale of the early polis remained quite modest by modern standards. Even the largest ones like Athens, Corinth, or Syracuse contained only tens of thousands of citizens.
Most numbered their citizen populations in mere thousands or even hundreds, tiny by our standards.
This relatively small size fostered direct participation in political affairs and created intense social bonds among citizens. You knew the people you were governing with.
However, it also generated fierce competition for limited resources, leading to frequent inter-Greek warfare, a pattern that unfortunately would persist.
So this strong sense of local identity and civic pride was a double-edged sword. It fostered incredible cultural output, but its inherent independence often led to conflict.
In terms of political experimentation, this era was a real hotbed of new ideas. Initially, wealthy families or clans held sway, forming an aristocracy.
They typically shared power among themselves, rotating offices, limiting entry to those with noble lineage or substantial land holdings. The best men rule.
However, this aristocratic phase proved transitional in many polis, giving way to different forms of governance.
The 7th and 6th centuries BCE witnessed a sequence of political experiments across the Greek world. Many communities experienced periods of tyranny.
Ruled by individuals seizing power unconstitutionally, often with significant popular support against the entrenched aristocratic factions. Not quite the modern meaning of tyrant.
No, despite their negative connotation in later Greek thought and modern usage, many early tyrants like Cypselus of Corinth, Cleisthenes of Sicyon, or Pisistratus of Athens implemented popular policies.
Sponsoring public works, promoting religious festivals, patronizing arts and culture, thereby gaining favor with the common people.
These tyrannies typically lasted only 1 to 3 generations before giving way to broader constitutional arrangements, a sort of stepping stones sometimes.
Sparta, for instance, followed a fascinatingly unique path. It evolved its unique dual kingship, a council of elders, an assembly of citizens, and powerful magistrates called ephors.
This happened in response to internal crises during the 7th century BCE, particularly relating to their subjugated Helot population.
This complex constitution, attributed to the legendary lawgiver Lycurgus, created remarkable stability at the cost of radical social regimentation and the brutal subjugation of the Helot population who worked the land.
Spartan citizens devoted themselves exclusively to rigorous military training from childhood, the oshoj.
Spartan women, interestingly, enjoyed greater freedom and authority than their counterparts elsewhere in Greece.
Receiving physical education, managing estates, while men focused on military duties, and could even own property in their own right.
Their primary value, however, remained the production of strong sons for the state, with mothers famously telling sons departing for battle to return with your shield or on it, meaning victorious or dead but never fleeing. It's a truly stark contrast to the emerging Athenian ideals.
Athens, on the other hand, followed a different, more revolutionary path toward constitutional government. After early written laws attributed to Draco proved excessively harsh, so harsh they were said to be written in blood.
Solon implemented far-reaching reforms in 594 BCE that laid crucial foundations for later Athenian democracy.
His measures included debt cancellation, the prohibition of debt slavery, the creation of property classes for political participation.
Meaning wealth, not just birth, could grant you political access. Huge change.
Right. Establishment of a popular court and the codification of laws. Though falling short of full democracy, Solon's reforms broadened political participation beyond the aristocracy and created a crucial social safety net, reducing tensions.
And then after an intervening period of tyranny under Pisistratus and his sons, Athens experienced its final pre-classical political transformation.
Through the truly revolutionary reforms of Cleisthenes in 508-507 BCE.
By reorganizing the citizen body into 10 artificial tribes that deliberately mixed residents from different regions of Attica, Cleisthenes broke the power of traditional kinship groups.
Imagine breaking up powerful political dynasties just by redrawing district lines, and created new civic structures based on territorial residence rather than birth or inherited wealth.
His system introduced the principle of rotation in office, broadened participation in the Council of 500, and strengthened the sovereign authority of the citizen assembly.
Essentially establishing the fundamental framework for classical Athenian democracy. This era, as you can see, truly showcased a vibrant political landscape, with various poleis experimenting with vastly different forms of governance.
Okay, so politics is changing rapidly. What about economically?
Economically, the Archaic period saw significant diversification and expansion. Agricultural production increased, possibly aided by the widespread adoption of iron tools that diffused during the Dark Ages, making farming more efficient.
Trade connections in the Mediterranean revived. Greek pottery becomes highly sought-after exports, demonstrating their craftsmanship and reaching far-flung markets.
And population pressures, combined with the lure of foreign markets, spurred a massive wave of colonization from the 8th to the 6th centuries BCE.
Greek city-states dispatched settlers to found new poleis abroad. Notably, in southern Italy and Sicily, Magna Graecia, along the coast of Thrace, around the Black Sea, even westward near modern Marseille.
These new cities maintained strong cultural bonds with their metropolis or mother city, sharing common gods and traditions.
This far-reaching expansion spread Greek customs, language, and mythology across the Mediterranean, while simultaneously introducing the settlers to local cultures, fostering a unique cultural exchange.
Militarily, a profound innovation occurred that mirrored the emerging civic identity. The hoplite phalanx became the key formation.
Heavy infantry, hoplites, standing shoulder to shoulder, shield overlapping shield, forming this dense, almost impenetrable wall.
Each hoplite was typically a citizen soldier, responsible for acquiring his own equipment. The phalanx's success lay not just in brute force, but in its absolute reliance on cooperation and collective discipline.
This fostered a powerful sense of shared responsibility and political empowerment among citizens, who literally fought side by side in defense of their community. Military service deeply tied to civic identity.
Naval capabilities also began to grow significantly in seafaring states, with Corinth and later Athens developing powerful fleets of triremes. Sea power becomes crucial.
Culturally, the Archaic Age saw a truly remarkable flowering. The Homeric epics, the Iliad and Odyssey, were likely set to writing in the 8th or early 7th century BCE.
Finally bringing centuries of oral tradition into a recognized literary form. Hesiod composed his Theogony, detailing the genealogies of gods and works and days, imparting moral and practical guidance.
Lyric poetry also thrived. Poets like Sappho on Lesbos exploring intensely personal feelings of love and longing. Others writing verses on war, politics, civic pride, a diverse literary landscape emerging.
In the visual arts, potters moved from the previous geometric motifs to more figurative designs, depicting human and animal forms with increasing skill.
Black figure vase painting emerged. Then the innovative red figure technique, allowing for even more detailed renderings of the human form in complex scenes.
Sculptors began crafting life-size figures known as choros, nude male youth, and core-clothed female youth, evolving steadily toward more realistic anatomy and posture, moving away from the more rigid earlier forms.
Religious practice also became increasingly structured around community sanctuaries and public festivals, with monumental stone temples replacing smaller shrines.
The distinctive Greek temple form evolved, characterized by columned porticos, rectangular plans, and elaborate sculptural decoration that often narrated mythological scenes.
And the growth of Panhellenic sanctuaries represents one of the period's most significant religious developments. Sites like Olympia, Delphi, Nemea, Isthmia
Grew from local shrines to major religious centers, attracting visitors from across the entire Greek world.
These sanctuaries became crucial for fostering a shared Hellenic identity. They hosted athletic competitions and religious festivals that fostered Hellenic identity across political boundaries.
The Olympic Games, traditionally founded in 776 BCE, expanded into a quadrennial event. Victory brought honor not just to individual athletes, but to their home place, intense civic pride involved.
The Oracle of Apollo at Delphi, in particular, gained immense significance as a religious center and even a diplomatic neutral ground.
Attracting pilgrims and city-states, seeking divine guidance on crucial matters of war and peace. Very influential.
So this period truly saw Greeks crystallize their cultural consciousness around shared values and practices, while simultaneously celebrating the distinctive identities of individual communities. This archaic synthesis
Created the conditions for the extraordinary flowering of classical Greek civilization. It was a period of incredible ferment and innovation.
But by the late 6th century BCE, a vast and formidable power was growing on the eastern horizon, the mighty Persian Empire.
The stage was set for a confrontation that would truly test the vitality of these new Greek innovations. The Persian Wars. The collision of the independent Greek city-states with the imperial might of Persia triggered defining conflicts that not only forged a sense of Hellenic identity, but fundamentally transformed the balance of power in the Greek world.
The Greek triumph against such overwhelming odds became a defining moment in their self-conception, particularly in Athens' democratic self-image, a David versus Goliath story, almost.
Very much so. The conflict's origins trace back to Persia's relentless expansion. Around 546 BCE, the Lydian kingdom of Western Anatolia fell to the burgeoning Persian Empire.
This directly brought the wealthy Ionian Greek cities along the coast of Asia Minor under Persian rule. These communities were culturally vibrant, but lacked collective unity under Persian governors or satraps,
Leading to growing dissatisfaction and a desire for autonomy. In 499 BCE, these Ionian cities, led by Miletus, finally rebelled against Persian dominion.
They appealed to their kinsmen across the Aegean for help, and Athens and a smaller city, Eretria, sent limited reinforcements, a seemingly minor act.
That would have monumental consequences. These forces daringly marched inland and burned the Persian regional center of Sardis.
Persia, however, responded with overwhelming force, methodically crushing the revolt by 494 BCE and tragically sacking Miletus, a brutal response.
King Darius I of Persia was enraged at Athens and Eretria for intervening in his affairs and resolved not only to punish them, but to expand Persian control into mainland Greece.
So intense was his resolve that he even had a servant say to him 3 times a day, "Master, remember the Athenians," to ensure he never forgot his vow.
This personal grudge, combined with imperial ambition, set the stage for Persia's first massive invasion of European Greece. Darius dispatched a fleet across the Aegean in 490 BCE.
They methodically subdued island strongholds on the way and besieged Eretria, capturing and utterly destroying it as a warning.
They then landed their army on the open plain of Marathon, about 40 kilometers northeast of Athens, a strategically chosen spot for a large invasion force.
At Marathon, Athenian forces, crucially joined by a small but brave contingent from Plataea, confronted the much larger Persian army on that open terrain.
Despite their significant numerical disadvantage, the disciplined hoplite phalanx proved incredibly effective under the brilliant general Miltiades.
The Athenians launched a decisive, unexpected charge that encircled the Persians, causing their ranks to collapse in disarray.
The Persians fled to their ships, suffering heavy casualties. It was a truly astonishing and surprising victory for Athens, defying all expectations.
This unexpected victory at Marathon bolstered Athenian confidence, immensely and emphatically emphasized the effectiveness of hoplite warfare against Persian infantry.
Proving a smaller, disciplined force could overcome sheer numbers. The name Marathon became legendary in Greek memory, a symbol of their resilience.
Recognizing that Persia remained a formidable danger, the Athenian general Themistocles, in particular, became a fervent advocate for building a stronger navy.
Anticipating future threats from the sea, a foresight that would prove absolutely critical.
King Darius died in 486 BCE, but his son Xerxes inherited his father's ambition and thirst for vengeance.
Xerxes spent years meticulously preparing a far larger force to punish the Greeks and conquer their lands. He famously bridged the Hellespont with ships and marched his colossal army into Europe.
In 480 BCE, this grand invasion force estimated well over 100,000 troops, plus a huge navy advance through Thrace and Macedonia, aiming to utterly break Greek resistance.
Faced with this truly existential threat, many Greek states pragmatically chose submission. But 31 states, led by the formidable powers of Sparta and Athens, determined to resist.
They formed a rare pan-Hellenic alliance and developed a coordinated strategy under Spartan military leadership.
The first major land engagement occurred at the narrow pass of Thermopylae, a natural choke point. There, a small Greek force, famously led by Spartan king Leonidas,
held off the overwhelming Persian army for 3 days against repeated Persian assaults. Incredible bravery.
until a local trader revealed a mountain path, allowing the Persians to outflank them. Leonidas and his 300 Spartans, along with some loyal Thespians and Thebans, fought to the death.
Buying crucial time for the remaining Greek forces to retreat, their stand became the ultimate legend of heroic sacrifice.
Simultaneously, the Greek fleet engaged the Persian navy at nearby Artemisium with inconclusive results over several days. Both sides took losses.
Eventually, the Greeks pulled back to safer positions. With central Greece now exposed and lost, the Allies withdrew to the Isthmus of Corinth to form a defensive line.
Athens was evacuated, its entire population temporarily relocated to the island of Salamis, and the city itself was occupied and tragically burned by the Persians.
Destroying its sacred temples on the Acropolis, a devastating moment for Greek freedom.
But out of that darkness came a brilliant strategic victory. The decisive naval battle of the war occurred in the narrow strait between Salamis and the mainland.
The Athenian leader, Themistocles, through sheer strategic brilliance and a calculated deception, convinced reluctant allies to fight there.
He then maneuvered the much larger Persian fleet into the confined waters, where its numerical advantage became a crippling liability.
The more agile and maneuverable Greek triremes, with their bronze rams, inflicted a crushing defeat on the Persian navy.
Xerxes, watching the disaster unfold from a throne on the shore, was devastated and soon retreated to Asia with a portion of his army,
leaving his general Mardonius to continue the land campaign the following year.
The final major land battle occurred at Plataea in 479 BCE, where the largest hoplite army ever assembled, a united Greek force led by the Spartan regent Pausanias,
decisively defeated the Persian land forces, a huge victory.
And on the exact same day, Greek forces achieved another victory, destroying the remnants of the Persian fleet at Mycale on the Anatolian coast. Twin victories.
These twin victories effectively ended the Persian invasion of mainland Greece. The unexpected victory against overwhelming odds reinforced Greek confidence.
and sharpened their sense of cultural superiority over non-Greeks they called barbarians. Crucially, this shared struggle temporarily transcended chronic interstate rivalries.
Establishing a brief, almost mythical moment of Hellenic unity in the face of a common enemy.
The Persian Wars had profound and lasting consequences, while Sparta had contributed the overall commander and the largest hoplite contingent.
Athens had provided the bulk of the decisive navy at Salamis, the turning point. As a result, Athens' prestige was enormously enhanced.
When Sparta, true to its land-based nature, withdrew from offensive operations against Persia in the Aegean, Athens decisively stepped forward.
Leading a coalition of island and coastal states determined to continue the fight against any lingering Persian threat.
This alliance, formed around 478 BCE and known to modern historians as the Delian League, would become the vehicle for Athenian imperial ambitions.
Initially, it truly operated as a voluntary alliance with its treasury and headquarters on the sacred island of Delos. Member states contributed ships or money towards the common goal.
Early campaigns under Athenian leadership proved highly successful, expanding the alliance throughout the Aegean, but
Gradually, however, the nature of the alliance profoundly changed. Athens began treating contributions from member states less as voluntary contributions and more as tribute, like taxes.
yeah. When members like Naxos or Thasos attempted to withdraw, Athens used military force to compel their continued participation, no longer voluntary.
The League treasury was controversially moved from Delos to Athens in 454 BCE, explicitly symbolizing the transformation from equal alliance to Athenian empire.
Athens gained overwhelming naval supremacy in the Aegean, and with it, effective control over its allies.
So, the Persian Wars left a deep imprint on Greek identity, fostering immense pride and a temporary sense of unity. But paradoxically,
They also set in motion the very tensions between the ascendant Athens and the traditional power Sparta that would define the next turbulent era of Greek history.
the Persian Wars left Greece unified, confident, victorious. But the unintended, almost inevitable consequence was the meteoric rise of Athens, transforming its alliance into an empire.
This extraordinary period, known as the Golden Age of Athens, was a time of unprecedented cultural and intellectual flourishing, a true explosion of genius.
Yet it was also a period of rising tensions that would eventually ignite the self-destructive conflict that consumed the Greek world, the Peloponnesian War.
This classical period, extending from the triumph of the Persian Wars to the rise of Macedon, witnessed both the pinnacle of Greek achievement, a period of unparalleled brilliance, and tragically, the self-destructive tendencies that would ultimately compromise Greek independence. It's a study in paradox, really.
By the mid-5th century BCE, Athens certainly stood at the forefront of Greek power. Its formidable navy, bolstered by its allied or subject states in the Delian League, controlled the Aegean Sea.
Immense tribute flowed into Athens. This wealth fueled massive construction projects, like those on the Acropolis, and supported an incredibly vibrant intellectual life.
This period of imperial growth coincided with the flourishing of Athenian radical democracy at home under the leadership of Pericles.
Who dominated Athenian politics from 461 to 429 BCE without holding extraordinary powers. He simply achieved consistent re-election as general strategos.
Athens truly experienced a golden age of cultural and intellectual achievement, proclaimed by Pericles himself as the School of Hellas, a model for others.
Democratic institutions in Athens expanded even further after the Persian Wars, reaching their most radical form. The ecclesia, or assembly of all adult male citizens, held final authority over legislation, war, peace.
A bull, or Council of 500, prepared bills for debate, and many public offices were filled by lottery to ensure broader citizen participation, not just the wealthy elite.
A significant shift, championed by Pericles, was the introduction of pay for public offices, which opened participation to those lacking independent wealth. A huge step towards real democracy.
Though it's crucial to note that women, enslaved people, and resident foreigners were excluded from full citizenship.
An unprecedented proportion of free males now took part in governance, debating and voting directly on policies. It was a truly revolutionary form of self-rule for its time.
Pericles, as you mentioned, emerged as a truly dominant statesman, repeatedly holding the office of strategos. He championed the idea that Athens had a unique destiny to lead the Greek world.
Almost a divine right to do so. And controversially used League funds money collected for defense against Persia to begin major construction on the Acropolis, which had been destroyed by the Persians.
This was an incredibly ambitious building program funded by that imperial tribute. The Parthenon, dedicated to Athena Parthenos, the city's patron goddess, became the crown jewel.
exemplifying the refined Doric style with its perfect proportions and a magnificent sculptural program overseen by Phidias, a renowned sculptor. Breathtaking, even today.
Other structures quickly followed. The Perpolia, a grand entrance gateway, the elegant temple of Athena Nike celebrating victory, and eventually the distinctive Erechtheion with its famous caryatid porch.
These projects not only honored the city's patron goddess, but showcased Athens' wealth and craftsmanship to the entire Greek world, employing thousands of workers drawn from various trades.
Pericles' justification for diverting league funds, though heavily criticized by allies, exemplified how imperial resources directly supported Athenian domestic policy and civic pride. It was a statement.
This era truly witnessed Athens' greatest achievements in drama, both tragedy and comedy. The tragic playwrights Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides.
Composed works exploring timeless themes of human suffering, moral dilemmas, divine justice, political tensions. Performed at annual religious festivals like the city Dionysia.
These plays combined poetic language, music, dance, theatrical spectacle in a uniquely Athenian art form that attracted visitors from throughout the Greek world.
Meanwhile, comic playwrights like Aristophanes created biting political satire, often with outrageous obscenity and fantastic plots.
Offering both uproarious entertainment and pointed social commentary. Think of plays like Lysistrata or The Clouds, which openly mocked political figures and social trends.
Through drama, Athenians publicly examined their most cherished values and controversial policies, demonstrating the remarkable freedom of speech that characterized their democratic culture. You could really say anything, almost.
Historical writing also emerged as a distinctive literary form during this period, moving beyond myth to critical inquiry. Herodotus, a native of Halicarnassus who spent significant time in Athens.
Hazm composed his histories primarily to document the Persian Wars, but he included extensive ethnographic and geographical digressions about the many peoples involved.
His wide-ranging curiosity and remarkable openness to non-Greek perspectives earned him the enduring label Father of History.
The Athenian Thucydides, writing about the later Peloponnesian War, developed a far more analytical methodology. He focused intensely on political and military affairs.
Critically evaluating sources, interviewing participants, meticulously seeking the underlying patterns in human events, emphasizing the role of power and fear. Very modern in a way.
Together, these pioneering historians established Western historical writing as a genre distinct from myth, epic, or religious narrative, laying the groundwork for modern historical inquiry.
In the visual arts, Athenian red figure pottery reaches its technical and artistic peak, showcasing incredibly intricate and dynamic scenes.
Sculptors, too, developed increasingly naturalistic representations of the human form, moving beyond the more rigid, archaic style. Phidias, the master sculptor,
Directed the sculptural program of the Parthenon and created the massive gold and ivory cult statue of Athena that stood inside the temple, a marvel of ancient craftsmanship, sadly lost.
Polyclitus of Argos established mathematical canons of proportion for depicting the ideal male form, striving for perfection and balance. The trend toward naturalism accelerated.
Sculptors achieving greater anatomical accuracy, convincing drapery, and profound emotional expression. You can really see the evolution.
The intellectual climate of classical Athens, particularly in the mid-5th century, actively encouraged philosophical inquiry and critical debate.
While earlier Greek philosophy had flourished primarily in Ionia and southern Italy, Athens became the undisputed center of intellectual life. Anaxagoras brought natural philosophy to the city.
Then came the Sophists, traveling professional educators like Protagoras and Gorgias, who taught rhetoric, argumentation, other practical skills to ambitious young men, often for a fee.
They famously questioned traditional moral and religious assumptions. Protagoras famously declared, "Man is the measure of all things."
Suggesting a profound shift toward human-centered thought and away from divine decree, they taught people how to think and argue, revolutionary and sometimes controversial.
But the most significant philosophical figure of the era, truly a towering intellect, was Socrates. He developed a distinctive method of questioning, the Socratic method.
Challenging conventional wisdom, relentlessly examining the very foundations of knowledge, though he famously wrote nothing himself.
His approach to ethical inquiry profoundly transformed Greek philosophy. Through relentless questioning, Socrates exposed contradictions and tirelessly sought precise definitions of moral concepts like justice, courage, piety.
His influence spread through the young men who followed him around Athens, including some from prominent families like Alcibiades and Plato.
This association, along with his questioning of traditional beliefs, eventually led to his controversial trial and execution in 399 BCE on charges of corrupting the youth and impiety.
Socrates famously accepted the verdict rather than fleeing, establishing a powerful model of philosophical integrity that would profoundly influence all subsequent Western thought. A martyr for philosophy.
So Periclean Athens, indeed, was proclaimed as the school of Hellas, allowing for unprecedented intellectual and artistic output, truly demonstrating the power of freedom of expression.
However, this growing wealth and power of Athens and its increasingly domineering behavior inevitably generated immense tension with other Greek states.
Particularly Sparta and its allies. The two systems truly represented diametrically opposed values. Athens, democratic, commercial, innovative, naval power. Sparta, oligarchic, agricultural, traditional, land power.
They were on a collision course. Friction increased dramatically as Athens consolidated its maritime empire and intervened in disputes among Sparta's neighbors.
Effectively expanding its influence at Sparta's expense. The resulting conflict, the Peloponnesian War, would last with interruptions from 431 to 404 BCE.
Ultimately involving nearly every Greek state and permanently altering the Hellenic world.
Thucydides, who both observed and participated in the war, famously identified its fundamental cause as the growth of Athenian power and the fear which this caused in Sparta. Pure power politics.
The immediate trigger involved complex disputes among secondary states allied with the two powers, like Corinth's complaints against Athenian interference. But the underlying tensions had developed over decades.
When war finally erupted, the opposing sides pursued contrasting strategies that perfectly matched their distinctive strengths. Sparta and its allies, vastly superior in land warfare,
Invaded Attica annually, hoping to draw the Athenians into a decisive hoplite battle, a head-on confrontation.
Athens, following Pericles' shrewd strategy, refused this land confrontation. Instead, the entire population withdrew behind the city walls.
Relying on its formidable navy to maintain maritime supply lines and conduct raids on Peloponnesian coastal territories, a war of attrition.
This approach minimized Athens' main military weakness, but imposed severe strain on the population crowded within the city, making them vulnerable to disease.
And the early years saw terrible suffering, especially in Athens. A devastating plague struck the city in 430-429 BCE.
Killing perhaps a quarter of the population, including Pericles himself. This undermined morale and sparked unrest, leading to less coherent leadership and more erratic policy decisions. A huge blow.
After years of inconclusive fighting, both sides accepted the Peace of Nicias in 421 BCE, intended to last 50 years.
But ultimately holding for just 6. This breathing space benefited Athens, allowing a partial recovery, but underlying tensions remained unresolved.
Aggressive leaders on both sides soon pushed for renewed confrontation, unable to let go of their rivalries.
The pivotal moment, a truly disastrous turning point for Athens, came in 415 BCE when Athens launched its fateful Sicilian expedition.
An enormous military operation targeting Syracuse, a powerful Greek city-state in Sicily, lured by prospects of immense wealth and strategic advantage, overreach.
Definitely seems like it. Despite warnings from conscious figures like Nicias, the massive fleet sailed. Almost immediately, Alcibiades, a leading general and controversial figure, was recalled to stand trial.
And famously defected to Sparta, advised them on how best to oppose Athenian strategy. Incredible betrayal.
The campaign struggled, Syracuse received Spartan aid, and the entire expedition ended in catastrophe by 413 BCE. Thousands of Athenians killed or captured.
This disaster gravely weakened Athens at a critical moment from which it would never fully recover.
Seizing this golden opportunity, Sparta renewed offensive operations with increased vigor. On Alcibiades' advice, they established a permanent fortification at Decelia in Athenian territory.
Disrupting agriculture and commerce directly, Spartan operations in the Eastern Aegean, crucially supported by renewed Persian funding, increasingly challenged Athenian naval supremacy.
Political turmoil compounded Athens' difficulties. In 411 BCE, an oligarchic coup briefly established the 400 in Athens, though democracy was quickly restored. A city teetering on the brink.
The decisive battle came at Aegospotami in 405 BCE. The brilliant Spartan admiral Lysander captured nearly the entire Athenian fleet while its crews were ashore.
A naval catastrophe left Athens utterly defenseless. Without control of the sea lanes, the city soon faced starvation under a brutal Spartan blockade.
By spring 404 BCE, Athens surrendered on harsh terms. demolition of the long walls, surrender of all but 12 ships, acceptance of Spartan leadership, recall of exiled oligarchs.
The Delian League was dissolved, and Athens' glorious maritime empire simply collapsed. End of an era.
The immediate aftermath brought further suffering to Athens. A Spartan-backed oligarchic regime, known as the 30 Tyrants, ruled brutally.
Before being overthrown by exiled Democrats who returned and restored popular rule. Remarkably, the restored democracy then implemented a general amnesty.
Forbidding prosecution for most actions during the oligarchic period, an extraordinary act of political reconciliation helped heal civic divisions and allowed Athens to slowly rebuild.
Beyond Athens, the Peloponnesian War profoundly transformed the entire Greek world. Sparta emerged as the dominant power, but proved ill-equipped for imperial leadership.
Its rigid, military-focused ethos was incompatible with administering a vast network of subject states. Its heavy-handed governance generated widespread resentment.
Crucially, Persian influence increased substantially in the Eastern Asian. The great king now frequently played Greek states against each other, exploiting their divisions.
The Peloponnesian War was a true turning point, chronicled so well by Thucydides, analyzed as a conflict driven by cold, hard power struggles and fear.
It fractured old alliances, stifled economic growth, tragically undermined the idea that Greek city-states could effectively resist outside interference. The entire Greek world was exhausted.
Ripe for a new power dynamic. The balance had shifted dramatically, and from the northern fringes.
A kingdom long dismissed as backward was quietly building its strength. Macedon, ready to reshape the entire Greek world. And that brings us to the dynamic beginnings of the 4th century BCE.
So following the devastating Peloponnesian War, the 4th century BCE was this complex web of shifting hegemonies among weakened Greek states.
Yes, Sparta's brief dominance faltered, Thebes briefly rose to prominence, Athens valiantly sought to recover.
And then a previously marginal kingdom, Macedon, under the brilliant leadership of Philip II, strategically unified Greece, fundamentally ending the classical age of independent city-states.
It's a period of constant flux, leading to an unexpected new order. While the major police exhausted themselves in endless warfare, locked in this cycle of shifting alliances and betrayals,
Macedon, in northern Greece, was quietly, systematically building its strength. Under Philip II, who gained the throne in 359 BC, Macedon would fundamentally alter the course of Greek history.
becoming the new dominant force. Sparta's victory in 404 BCE certainly left it dominant, but its attempts to exercise leadership revealed fundamental weaknesses.
Its small citizen bodies simply could not provide enough manpower for the direct administration of a far-flung empire.
And its military-focused ethos, so effective in battle, was incompatible with the cosmopolitan engagement required for successful imperial leadership. Great warriors, but terrible administrators.
Sparta's policies also generated widespread resentment. They installed narrow oligarchies, dicarchies, and military governors, Harmastes, and former Athenian allied states,
Forcing them into Sparta's rigid system. This heavy-handed approach promptly prompted former allies like Corinth and Thebes, along with the reviving Athens, to become increasingly alienated.
ready to challenge Spartan dominance. This discontent erupted into the Corinthian War from 395 to 387 BCE.
Marking the first major challenge to Spartan hegemony. Persia, which had controversially financed Sparta's final naval campaigns in the Peloponnesian War.
Now shrewdly reversed its policy, financing an anti-Spartan coalition of Thebes, Corinth, Argos, and a resurgent Athens, playing both sides.
This war dragged on inconclusively for years, draining resources from all Greek participants while Persian influence steadily increased.
The war's resolution came through Persian diplomatic intervention, the Peace of Antalcidas, also called the King's Peace.
This dictated settlement, enforced by Sparta, explicitly recognized Persian control over Greek cities in Asia Minor, a truly humiliating concession.
Starkly highlighted Greek weakness and inability to act independently. Sparta's collaboration with Persia, the old enemy, deeply betrayed the legacy of the Persian Wars for many Greeks.
Sparta's decline continued through a series of strategic miscalculations and failures. In 382 BCE, a Spartan commander seized the Theban citadel.
This aggressive act exemplified Sparta's abandonment of principled leadership in favor of opportunistic domination, further alienating other Greek states.
The most devastating blow, however, came with the emancipation of Messenia in 369 BCE by the Thebans. Messenia had traditionally been Sparta's economic foundation through the forced labor of the Helots.
Its liberation would eventually reduce it to second-rate status, effectively crippling Sparta's economic and military might. The end of Spartan power, really.
A truly surprising development during this period was the meteoric, albeit brief, rise of Thebes, a small group of Theban exiles led by the charismatic Pelopidas.
Overthrew the pro-Spartan government in 379 BCE with crucial assistance from Athens. This Theban revolution marked the beginning of a new power dynamic.
Thebes rapidly emerged as a formidable military power, primarily under the brilliant leadership of Epaminondas. He revolutionized hoplite warfare at the decisive Battle of Leuctra in 371 BCE.
Placing his best troops in a 50-deep formation on the left wing, a radical tactical innovation directly opposite the elite Spartan forces.
This concentrated mass shattered the Spartan right wing, dealing a devastating blow to Spartan military prestige and manpower. Killed 400 of the 700 full Spartan citizens present.
A shockwave that transformed the Greek world, proving Sparta was no longer invincible.
Epaminondas pressed his advantage, leading bold campaigns into the Peloponnese, famously liberating Messenia from Spartan control and supporting democratic counterweights in Arcadia.
Striking directly at Sparta's economic and strategic foundations. However, Theban dominance was fleeting, tied too closely to its extraordinary leaders.
Epaminondas fell mortally wounded at the Battle of Mantinea in 362 BCE, a tragic loss. Without his leadership, Theban power gradually declined, unable to maintain its hegemonic position.
Athens, meanwhile, pursued a parallel path of recovery and realignment. Its restored democracy after 403 BCE maintained remarkable stability.
A testament to its civic structures, economic recovery proceeded gradually, with commerce and silver mining eventually returning to substantial prosperity. Naval power revived, though not to its previous scale.
Athens then formed a second Athenian League in 377 BCE, representing its most successful attempt to rebuild its position as a leading naval power.
Unlike the coercive Delian League, this new alliance explicitly incorporated safeguards against Athenian imperial abuses, prohibiting Athenian land ownership, garrisons, or tribute, a fairer deal.
Initially successful, it helped check Spartan power and offered a more equitable model of alliance. However, old habits proved difficult to break.
As Athens grew stronger, it reverted to domineering behavior toward league members, leading to resentment. The social war 357 to 355 BCE erupted.
Several major allies revolted against perceived Athenian imperialism. Athens failed to suppress this rebellion, and the confederation disintegrated.
Effectively ending Athenian prospects for renewed hegemony and leaving a fragmented Greece. Again.
And this is precisely the fragmented, exhausted landscape that Philip II of Macedon inherited, while the major polis exhausted themselves in endless, indecisive warfare.
Macedon, a kingdom historically dismissed by southern Greeks as backward and semi-barbaric, underwent rapid and truly transformative development in the mid-4th century under Philip II.
Philip, a military genius and shrewd diplomat, had spent part of his youth as a hostage in Thebes, crucially observing Epaminondas' military reforms firsthand.
And he completely transformed Macedon into a formidable power. He reorganized the Macedonian army, introducing a longer pike called the sarissa,
creating an incredibly formidable phalanx that was 16 ranks deep, a dense, almost impenetrable wall of spears.
He also established an elite companion cavalry, personally led by the king, and skillfully utilized light troops and skirmishers, creating a flexible, multifaceted fighting force that revolutionized warfare.
Through a masterful combination of diplomacy, strategic marriages, and ruthless warfare, Philip secured Macedon's frontiers and expanded southward into Thessaly and beyond.
He shrewdly capitalized on the internal rivalries of Greek polis, offering alliances or threatening intervention, gradually bringing key Greek cities under his influence. A master chess player.
In Athens, however, a powerful voice arose against Philip. Demosthenes, a brilliant orator, urgently advocated resistance to Macedonian expansion.
Through his powerful speeches known as the Philippics, he painted Philip as an existential threat to Greek freedom and the democratic way of life, calling for united opposition.
These warnings initially gained limited traction, as a pro-Macedonian faction argued for accommodation and peace, underestimating Philip's ambitions.
But the steady southward progress of Macedonian power eventually forced broader Greek recognition of the danger, when Philip captured the Athenian grain route through the Hellespont.
Athens finally declared war. Demosthenes then achieved his greatest diplomatic success by forging an unlikely alliance between Athens and its traditional enemy, Thebes.
The decisive confrontation came at Chaeronea in Boeotia in August 338 BCE. The combined Theban and Athenian army bravely faced Philip's veteran Macedonian forces.
The battle turned on the brilliant cavalry charge, led by Philip's 18-year-old son, Alexander, which broke the elite Theban sacred band.
securing a decisive Macedonian victory. This single engagement effectively ended the political independence of the Greek city-states as they had known it for centuries, the end of an era.
Philip's post-Chaeronea settlement demonstrated both moderation and shrewd strategic vision, rather than attempting direct occupation.
He established Macedonian garrisons at key strategic points, Thebes, Chalcis, Corinth, and reorganized the Greek states into a formal League of Corinth, with himself as hegemon or leader.
This league bound members to follow Macedonian foreign policy, prohibited internal warfare between members, and guaranteed existing political systems, effectively freezing the status quo under Macedonian supervision. Brilliant control.
The culmination of Philip's Greek policy came in 337 BCE, when the League of Corinth formally declared war on Persia, with Philip as supreme commander.
This bold initiative skillfully positioned him as the champion of Pan-Hellenic vengeance for the Persian invasions of the previous century, co-opting Greek cultural memory for his own imperial ambitions.
However, before Philip could fully realize his grand plan of invading Persia, he was tragically assassinated in 336 BCE while attending his daughter's wedding festivities.
The throne then passed to his incredibly ambitious son, Alexander, who would transform his father's considerable achievement into one of history's most spectacular empires.
Philip's achievement truly set the stage for something even grander, a scale of conquest previously unimaginable. In 336 BC, a 20-year-old prince named Alexander ascended the Macedonian throne.
And within a decade, he would conquer an empire stretching from Greece to Egypt and deep into Asia, earning the epithet the Great. His legacy would reshape the ancient world in ways no one could have foreseen. When Alexander ascended the Macedonian throne in the summer of 336 BC, few, if any, could have predicted that this young 20-year-old king would literally transform the world within 13 extraordinary years.
Yeah, born to Philip II and his formidable wife Olympias, he received an exceptional education. A unique blend.
Combining traditional Macedonian martial values with profound Greek intellectual training under the tutelage of none other than Aristotle himself. Imagine having Aristotle as your tutor.
Quite the education. He spent time at the royal court at Pella, witnessing his father's incredible military and political achievements firsthand, then crucially studied under Aristotle at Mieza.
Absorbing Greek literature, philosophy, science, medicine, morals, logic, art, everything. He developed this deep passion for Homer's Iliad.
Carried an annotated copy given to him by Aristotle on all his campaigns. This blend of Macedonian martial tradition and Hellenic intellectual refinement produced a ruler of remarkable complexity and ambition.
Capable of both brutal conquest and intellectual curiosity. His ascension faced immediate perilous challenges, though.
Definitely. His father's sudden assassination created a dangerous power vacuum. Multiple succession candidates, restless subject peoples, eager to test the new young ruler.
But Alexander, even at that young age, moved decisively to secure his position, swiftly eliminated potential rivals to the throne, showcasing a ruthless streak early on.
Meanwhile, southern Greek states, particularly Thebes and Athens, mistook the transition as an opportunity to reclaim their hard-won independence from Macedonian dominance.
Alexander's response demonstrated the swift military decisiveness that would characterize his entire reign, rapidly marching south with his father's veteran army.
He reasserted Macedonian authority before any full-scale rebellion could truly materialize. When Thebes, bold enough to revolt in 335 BCE, defied him.
Alexander made a brutal example of the city, utterly destroyed it, sparing only temples and the house of the poet Pindar.
6,000 Thebans were killed, and the survivors sold into slavery. A shocking atrocity by Greek standards, but one that effectively discouraged further resistance.
Sent a clear, chilling message: challenge Alexander at your peril. So he quickly established his authority not just through inheritance, but through swift, forceful action.
Showcasing the tactical brilliance that would define his reign. With Greece pacified by spring 334 BCE, Alexander was prepared to launch the grand Persian expedition his father had meticulously planned.
He crossed the Hellespont with approximately 37,000 troops, a modest force compared to the vast resources of the Persian Empire.
But composed of highly experienced infantry, elite cavalry, and specialized units forged by Philip. And he paid homage to Homeric heroes at Troy.
A symbolic gesture uniting his campaign with Greek epic heritage, portraying himself as a new Achilles, very conscious of his image.
The expedition's first major engagement occurred at the Granicus River in northwestern Anatolia. Here, Persian satraps had assembled a substantial force to halt the advance.
Alexander personally led his companion cavalry in a daring river crossing under enemy fire, creating chaos in Persian ranks.
The subsequent battle ended in a complete Macedonian victory, with Alexander distinguishing himself through incredible personal courage, nearly being killed in the fray. This victory opened western Anatolia.
Alexander then implemented a strategic policy that set a pattern, combining administrative continuity with political reorganization.
Persian officials often replaced with Macedonian or Greek administrators, but tribute payments maintained, just redirected to Alexander's treasury.
Crucially, Greek cities along the coast were liberated from Persian control and formally enrolled in the League of Corinth under Macedonian hegemony, portraying him as a liberator.
The first direct confrontation with the great king Darius III himself occurred at the Battle of Assus in 333 BCE, near Issus in southeastern Asia Minor.
The rugged terrain limited the Persian numerical advantage, which Alexander shrewdly exploited. Alexander's cavalry charged directly at Darius's position,
Causing the Persian king to panic and flee the battlefield. The Persian army disintegrated in a rout. Darius's family fell into Alexander's custody.
whom he treated with remarkable respect and magnanimity, crafting a powerful narrative of magnanimity that contrasted with Persian customs. Smart PR.
Rather than pursuing Darius immediately, Alexander, with strategic foresight, turned south to secure all Persian naval bases in the Levant and Egypt, neutralizing Persia's navy.
The siege of Tyre in 332 BCE became a prime example of his unwavering determination. This island city resisted for months.
Alexander, with incredible engineering prowess, built a massive causeway connecting the island to the mainland, driving siege engines forward under heavy fire, eventually breached the walls.
The capture was brutal, thousands killed or sold into slavery, but it demonstrated Alexander's resolve to remove all threats behind him before advancing further.
Arriving in Egypt without serious opposition, Alexander was welcomed as a liberator from Persian rule. Egyptian priests recognized him as a legitimate pharaoh.
Linking him to divine lineage, Alexander made offerings to Egyptian gods, and an oracle supposedly addressed him as son of Zeus Ammon.
Further boosting his perceived divinity among both Macedonians and Egyptians. He then founded a new city at the western Nile Delta named Alexandria.
Intended as a strategic port and administrative center, it would rapidly grow into the major Hellenistic metropolis and intellectual hub of the ancient world.
In 331 BCE, Alexander returned to confront Darius again, who had gathered an even larger force near Gaugamela.
Despite the Persians' vast numerical advantage and war elephants, Alexander's tactical genius was at its height.
He arranged his troops at an unusual angle, drawing Persian forces away, then led a devastating charge directly toward Darius, who once again fled the battlefield.
The Persian army disintegrated. Though Darius escaped, the battle effectively ended the Achaemenid Empire. Alexander had defeated the greatest power of the age in just 3 years.
The victorious Macedonians proceeded to Babylon, which famously surrendered without resistance. Alexander showed respect for Babylonian traditions.
Then continued to Persepolis, the symbolic heart of the Persian Empire, capturing immense treasure in its royal palaces.
Famously, parts of Persepolis were set ablaze. Possibly revenge for Athens? Maybe drunken excess? Still debated. But this act marked the downfall of the Achaemenid Empire's political center.
Alexander then pursued Darius deeper into the Iranian plateau. But before they could capture him, the Persian king was murdered by his own satrap, Bessus,
who then proclaimed himself the new king. Alexander, shrewdly casting himself as the rightful successor and avenger, condemned Bessus as a usurper.
He then marched into the far eastern provinces, Bactria and Sogdiana, modern Afghanistan and Central Asia, from 329 to 327 BCE.
These campaigns proved far more challenging. Relentless guerrilla resistance in mountainous terrain. Alexander adapted tactics using speed and surprise.
Secured the region through military pressure, strategic marriages like his union with Roxane, a Bactrian noblewoman, and establishing garrison cities.
What's fascinating here is Alexander's experimentation with cultural fusion, a vision that often clashed with his Macedonian officers.
He began incorporating 30,000 Persian youths trained in Macedonian military methods into his army, integrating the empire.
However, his attempt to introduce proskynesis, Persian prostration, before the king met fierce resistance from Macedonians, saw it as degrading for free Greeks.
It showed a growing divide between his universal vision and their traditional values. These internal tensions frequently erupted.
Alexander uncovered conspiracies, like involving Philotas, son of his general Parmenion, leading to swift executions, ruthless when threatened.
He also famously, tragically, killed his companion Clytus the Black in a drunken quarrel after Clytus criticized his orientalizing tendencies.
Though Alexander exhibited immediate, profound remorse, the incident highlighted the growing gulf between the king's expanding vision and the traditional expectations of his Macedonian officers.
Many of whom simply wanted to go home and enjoy their spoils after years of campaigning.
Despite these mounting tensions, Alexander pressed eastward into India, campaigning from 327 to 326 BCE.
Faced King Porus in the Battle of the Hydaspes, costly but victorious, involving terrifying war elephants.
However, his army, having marched thousands of miles, not seen home in 8 years, became unhappy with the constant war. They finally mutinied at the Hyphasis River.
Forcing him to turn back from further conquests in India, a rare instance where his will was defied.
On his arduous return journey through the Gedrosian Desert, Alexander undertook intensive administrative consolidation, punished corrupt governors.
At Susa, he held a grand mass wedding ceremony. He and 90 officers married Persian or Eastern noblewomen, symbolizing his vision of cultural fusion.
Creating a new imperial elite, he also signaled that ethnic Macedonians would share imperial responsibilities with capable Persians, bold and progressive.
Alexander's final year witnessed intensive administrative organization and incredibly ambitious planning, received embassies from across the Mediterranean world.
His plans reportedly included circumnavigation of Arabia, conquest of North Africa, Carthage, Western Mediterranean powers, suggesting he envisioned a truly universal empire.
Before implementing these, he contracted a fever in Babylon, possibly typhoid, malaria. Ancient sources hint at poisoning.
He died on June 10th or 11th, 323 BCE, just before his 33rd birthday, according to tradition when asked who he left his empire to.
He replied chillingly, to the strongest, ensuring immediate conflict among his ambitious generals, chaos baked in.
Alexander's 13-year reign, though incredibly brief, permanently transformed the ancient world. His conquests ended the Persian Empire, spread Greek culture throughout the Near East,
Opened vast new trade routes, established dozens of new cities bearing his name, created unprecedented contact between diverse civilizations.
Yet his sudden death, without a clear successor, immediately revealed the fragility of personal empire, built on his singular personality.
Alexander's death plunged his vast empire into immediate chaos as his generals scrambled for control. But this fragmentation didn't mean the end of Greek influence.
Quite the opposite. It ushered in a new era of unprecedented cultural blending, remarkable scientific advancement, and profound philosophical innovation across a truly cosmopolitan world. The Hellenistic Age. This period, spanning nearly 3 centuries after Alexander's death, is called the Hellenistic Age. It saw Greek culture expand throughout the Eastern Mediterranean and far beyond, mingling with local traditions to create entirely new forms of art, philosophy, and governance. It was a remarkable era of cultural dynamism.
After Alexander's sudden death in 323 BCE, his top generals, the Diadochi, or successors, began carving out territories from the colossal empire he had built.
It quickly became clear that none could maintain overall unity, leading to Alexander's vast conquests, fragmenting into multiple competing kingdoms.
Due to incessant disputes among his ambitious generals over succession, first to his infant son Alexander IV, then to themselves, a scramble for power.
The relentless wars of the Diadochi, stretching over several tumultuous decades, eventually resulted in the establishment of distinct, powerful dynasties, the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt.
Founded by Ptolemy Soter, centered in the vibrant city of Alexandria. The Ptolemies styled themselves as pharaohs while carefully retaining Greek administrative and cultural forms, a unique hybrid rule.
This kingdom maintained remarkable stability for nearly 3 centuries, becoming a center of wealth and learning.
Then there was the vast Seleucid Empire in Asia, founded by Seleucus Nicator, stretching incredibly from Asia Minor all the way to Persia and beyond.
This vast empire faced inherent challenges of administration and defense due to its enormous geographic spread and limited Greek Macedonian population base. It gradually lost regions.
And finally, the Antigonid Kingdom in Macedonia, established by Antigonus Gonatas, maintained rule over the Macedonian homeland and wielded significant influence over Greek city-states to the south.
This smallest of the 3 major kingdoms nevertheless remained militarily formidable, constantly engaging in the complex politics of Greece itself.
Beyond these 3 major kingdoms, several significant independent states also emerged or reasserted themselves. The island of Rhodes
developed into a major commercial power, leveraging its strategic position to safeguard maritime trade. Pergamon in western Anatolia grew into a significant cultural center under the Attalid dynasty.
Known for its magnificent library and sculpture. And in Bactria, deep in Central Asia, Greek rulers established an independent kingdom that eventually expanded into northwestern India.
Leaving behind stunning Greco-Buddhist art, meanwhile the Parthians, originally a nomadic Iranian people, gradually built a powerful state that would eventually challenge and replace Seleucid control in Iran and Mesopotamia. Power shifts again.
Back in the Greek homeland, something fascinating was happening despite the shift to larger monarchies, while Athens and Sparta notably declined from their classical prominence,
New federal structures emerged that transcended the limitations of the traditional peons. Examples include the Achaean and Aetolian leagues.
which developed sophisticated constitutional arrangements balancing local city autonomy with central federal institutions, creating more effective defensive organizations, self-governance on a larger scale.
Despite this political fragmentation, the Hellenistic world maintained substantial cultural unity, largely driven by the spread of Greek influence. Greek emerged as the international language.
Of government, commerce, and high culture throughout the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond. The lingua franca.
Ruling elites, even when they incorporated native nobility, cultivated Greek education, artistic tastes, literary traditions, making Greekness a mark of prestige.
The new cities founded by Alexander and his successors, Alexandria, Antioch, Pergamon, served as vital administrative centers and outposts of Hellenic culture.
Creating vast networks of urban civilization. These cities featured Greek-style agoras, theaters, gymnasia, all the hallmarks of Greek civic life. But they also integrated local elements.
Creating a vibrant cultural fusion that was unique to each region, a true cosmopolitan blend.
This cultural blending was truly remarkable. Egyptian, Babylonian, Persian, other ancient traditions actively influenced Greek settlers.
Inspiring new religious cults and hybrid deities like Serapis, deliberately created during the early Ptolemaic period by combining Greek and Egyptian divine elements.
To appeal to both populations. This process, known as interpretatio Graeca, where Greeks identified foreign gods with their own pantheon, facilitated profound cultural exchange, while often preserving traditional forms under new names. A deliberate strategy.
This entire period represented a globalization of Greek culture, but one that distinctly diverged from the palace-centered classical culture.
Shifting towards a more expansive cosmopolitan world where Greek traditions mingle dynamically with local traditions, creating something entirely new and exciting.
This cosmopolitan environment fostered a truly remarkable surge in intellectual and scientific flourishing. Alexandria, founded by Alexander himself,
Grew rapidly under Ptolemaic patronage to become the Mediterranean's largest and most dynamic urban center. Its greatest cultural institutions were the legendary library and the museum.
aiming to collect all significant works of literature from throughout the known world, attracting scholars for literary criticism, mathematical research, geographical exploration.
Astronomical observation, medical investigation, philosophical inquiry. This unprecedented concentration of resources and brilliant minds made it the premier research center of the ancient world. A think tank, basically.
And it certainly attracted some truly monumental scientific figures. Euclid, for instance, systematized geometric knowledge in his Elements.
Creating a logical structure that would define mathematical education for over 2 millennia. Still relevant today.
Archimedes of Syracuse was renowned for his work in hydrostatics, mechanics, ingenious inventions like the Archimedean screw.
Eratosthenes, amazingly, measured the Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy, using observations of shadows at different latitudes. Astonishing feat.
And Aristarchus of Samos, even more astonishingly, proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system, anticipating Copernicus by 18 centuries. Incredible foresight.
Medicine also became far more empirical through dissection practices, particularly at Alexandria. Pioneering figures like Herophilus and Erostratus fearlessly investigated the nervous system.
Distinguished arteries from veins and critically recognized the brain, rather than the heart, as the true center of intelligence. A monumental leap in understanding the human body.
Philosophical schools also evolved, developing new currents addressing personal ethics in a changing world where older civic identities had diminished relevance.
Stoicism, founded by Zeno of Citium, emphasized virtue, rational understanding of cosmic order, and the fulfillment of social duties regardless of external circumstances. Resilience, inner calm.
Epicureanism, led by Epicurus, taught that happiness came through moderate pleasure defined primarily as freedom from anxiety, ataraxia.
Advocating withdrawal from politics and freedom from supernatural fears. Other schools like skepticism, cynicism, Cyrenaicism also emerged.
reflecting the intellectual vitality and diverse approaches to life's fundamental questions in this new, broader world. Royal patronage, resources, exchange created an unparalleled environment.
Shifting philosophical focus towards individual well-being in a larger, less civic-focused world, what about art and architecture?
Hellenistic art moved beyond the idealized classical forms, displaying greater realism, emotional expression, and dynamic movement.
Sculptures like the Dying Gaul, depicting a mortally wounded barbarian, Laocoon and his sons, showcasing intense agony and the dramatic winged victory of Samothrace.
All showcased heightened drama, intricate drapery, profound pathos. Artists also began to depict everyday people, old men, children, expanding their subjects beyond solely gods or heroic youths.
Architecture, too, grew more monumental. Pergamon's Great Altar of Zeus, featuring a massive high-relief frieze of gods battling giants, exemplifies this grand scale.
The Corinthian order, with its ornate acanthus leaf capitals, gained immense popularity alongside the Doric and Ionic styles, becoming a hallmark of the age.
Urban planning became far more systematic, with wide boulevards and sprawling harbors, especially in new cities like Alexandria and Antioch.
Kings actively vied to outdo each other in constructing magnificent temples, libraries, public buildings, reflecting both Greek heritage and Eastern grandeur, a breathtaking blend.
Military affairs grew increasingly professionalized and technical. The successor kingdoms maintained standing armies.
Combining Macedonian-style phalanx infantry with specialized units, powerful cavalry, light troops, even terrifying war elephants adopted from Indian practice.
Naval warfare featured ships of unprecedented size, particularly the massive quinqueremes and even larger vessels of the Ptolemaic fleet. Naval engineering prowess.
Fortification design also evolved significantly to counter advanced siege techniques. Professional soldiers, rather than citizen militias, formed the backbone of Hellenistic armies.
Further separating military functions from citizenship. Economically, the Hellenistic period witnessed integration and innovation on a grand scale.
Alexander's conquest had released vast quantities of Persian treasury gold, stimulating commercial activity. Successor kingdoms maintained relatively stable currencies, facilitating long-distance trade.
New agricultural techniques spread, maritime commerce flourished, connecting ports from Spain to India through sophisticated networks, a globalized economy for its time.
The Hellenistic age, therefore, demonstrated a robust cultural and intellectual vitality, even as political power shifted from the small polis to vast monarchies.
For nearly 3 centuries, the Hellenistic world maintained a dynamic balance, expanding Greek culture far and wide. But this equilibrium would not survive the westward expansion of a new Mediterranean power.
Rome. The entrance of Rome into Eastern Mediterranean affairs fundamentally disrupted the Hellenistic power balance, setting the stage for the final absorption of the Greek world and a profound, lasting cultural fusion. It's a famous paradox often quoted. Though Roman legions conquered the Greek world, Greek ideas conquered Roman minds. The resulting Greco-Roman civilization synthesized elements from both traditions into a powerful cultural framework.
That would define the Mediterranean world for centuries and establish intellectual foundations still remarkably visible in modern Western institutions. It's a fascinating dynamic.
Rome's initial intervention in the Greek East was somewhat sporadic. Having decisively defeated Carthage in the brutal Punic Wars, Rome, now the dominant power in the West,
naturally turned its attention eastward. The First Macedonian War, where Philip V of Macedon allied with Rome's archenemy Hannibal, signaled Rome's growing concern with Macedonian power.
Roman involvement deepened significantly with the Second Macedonian War from 200 to 196 BCE, direct Roman military intervention culminating in the Battle of Cenocephalae in 197 BCE.
Where the Roman legion strikingly demonstrated its tactical superiority over the Macedonian phalanx. The flexible legions beat the rigid phalanx.
Philip V was decisively defeated. Rome initially proclaimed the freedom of the Greeks at the Isthmian Games in 96 BCE, but subtly retained a supervisory role, becoming the new arbiter.
Roman involvement deepened further when Antiochus III of the vast Seleucid kingdom intervened in Greece. Rome decisively defeated him at Thermopylae and then Magnesia,
confining Seleucid power east of the Taurus Mountains and removing another great Hellenistic king from the Greek sphere.
Tensions with Macedon flared again under King Perseus, leading to the Third Macedonian War. At the Battle of Pydna in 168 BCE.
Roman general Aemilius Paulus inflicted a crushing defeat. Macedonia was then divided into 4 separate republics, end of its kingdom.
Leading Greek citizens suspected of sympathizing were deported to Italy as hostages, including the historian Polybius, who would chronicle Rome's rise.
The final chapter in independent Macedonia came after a pretender briefly revived the kingdom. In 146 BCE, Macedonia became a Roman province, full Roman control.
The very same year, 146 BCE, witnessed the brutal destruction of Corinth after the Achaean League foolishly challenged Roman power.
Corinth, one of Greece's most prosperous commercial centers, was sacked, its inhabitants enslaved, and its buildings razed. A shocking demonstration.
Showing that Greek independence existed only at Roman sufferance. The province of Achaea was then established, bringing mainland Greece directly under Roman rule.
The absorption of the other major Hellenistic kingdoms continued. Pergamon was remarkably bequeathed to Rome by its last king, Attalus III, in 133 BCE, became the province of Asia.
The Seleucid Empire fragmented, Pompey the Great formally ending its existence in 64 BCE, creating the province of Syria.
Ptolemaic Egypt maintained nominal independence longest, until Cleopatra VII's defeat by Octavian at Actium in 31 BCE. Became a Roman province in 30 BCE.
So Rome's relentless expansion, often initially driven by a desire for stability, ultimately led to the complete political subjugation of the Greek world.
Revealing the inherent fragmentation and weakness that prevented a truly united Greek front against a powerful, unified adversary like Rome.
But, as the Roman poet Horace famously put it, captive Greece captured her savage conqueror, while politically subordinated.
Hellenistic culture remained vibrant and incredibly influential, ultimately transforming Roman society from within.
From the 3rd century BCE onwards, Greek tutors educated elite Roman youth, teaching them language, literature, rhetoric, philosophy.
Greek architectural and artistic forms were widely adopted and adapted for Roman structures. Latin literature borrowed heavily from Greek genres and themes.
Fluency in Greek and familiarity with Greek culture became essential markers of elite Roman identity, a sign of sophistication.
Roman conquest dramatically accelerated this cultural exchange by bringing unprecedented numbers of educated Greeks to Italy. Some enslaved, others voluntary teachers, physicians, artists.
Greek philosophers established schools in Rome. Roman generals routinely looted Greek art, displaying these priceless spoils and triumphs.
Ironically, this physical transfer visibly symbolized their cultural conquest of their conquerors.
However, the Roman response wasn't universally enthusiastic. Traditional Romans, like Cato the Elder, vehemently warned against Hellenic softness, corrupting Roman virtue.
This fascinating tension between Philhellenism, a love of Greek culture, and Roman traditionalism created a unique cultural dialectic, producing a distinctive Greco-Roman synthesis.
Not simple replacement. For ambitious Greeks under Roman rule, mastery of Roman political and legal systems offered pathways to influence.
Elite Greeks learned Latin, adapted to Roman administration, became valuable intermediaries. Athens, though politically diminished, gained renewed prestige as an educational center.
Young Romans traveled there to study rhetoric, philosophy, literature, deepening the intellectual connections, creating a shared intellectual space.
This reflected broader patterns. Greek philosophy profoundly influenced Roman thought, Stoicism particularly appealing to the Roman elite.
Greek medical knowledge, astronomy, math, engineering found practical application. Even religion saw syncretism, the Greco-Roman pantheon.
Mystery cults of Greek and Eastern origin gained popularity. The Greco-Roman civilization that emerged was a rich and complex synthesis,
demonstrating how profound cultural influence can transcend political and military outcomes. A testament to the enduring power of ideas.
And what's truly astonishing is that beyond the immediate Roman conquest, Greek knowledge was preserved and transmitted through multiple channels for centuries.
The division of the Roman Empire positioned the Greek-speaking eastern portion, the Byzantine Empire, for longer survival and incredible cultural continuity.
Byzantine scholars preserved and transmitted Greek learning, maintaining unbroken contact with ancient Greek literature, philosophy, science, political thought, interpreting them through Christian lenses. The New Testament itself, written in Koine Greek.
Islamic civilization provided another absolutely crucial channel, as Muslim armies conquered formerly Byzantine territories.
They encountered the rich intellectual heritage of the Hellenic world. During the Abbasid Caliphate, particularly in 9th century Baghdad, a systematic effort translated Greek scientific, medical, and philosophical works into Arabic.
Galen, Euclid, Ptolemy, Aristotle, made accessible. This stimulated remarkable intellectual developments as Muslim thinkers critically engaged with and built upon Greek ideas.
Preserving learning when it received less attention in Western Europe. The medieval West maintained more limited contact, primarily through sparse Latin translations.
Most Greek literature remained inaccessible to Latin readers until the European Renaissance.
The Italian Renaissance, however, was an absolutely pivotal moment, catalyzed partly by increased contact with Byzantine scholars fleeing Constantinople's fall in 1453.
Bringing priceless Greek manuscripts and linguistic expertise to Italy, this revival of learning profoundly transformed European intellectual life.
Works by Plato, Aristotle, Homer became the cornerstone of humanistic education. This demonstrates the remarkable resilience of Greek knowledge, actively preserved across diverse civilizations.
Ensuring its continuity and ultimate reintroduction into Western thought, so long after Greek political independence ended.
The intellectual, artistic, and political achievements of Hellenic civilization truly continued to shape human thought and expression across the globe. Their key contributions are foundational.
Athenian democracy, despite limitations, established the radical principle that citizens should govern themselves through direct participation.
Key concepts: citizenship, equality before the law, public deliberation, constitutional constraints, all have deep roots in Greek practice and theory.
In philosophy, Socrates' questioning method, Plato's theory of forms, Aristotle's systematic approach, pre-Socratic inquiry.
Establish foundational questions and methodologies that continue shaping our understanding of existence, knowledge, ethics, society.
In science, the Greeks pioneered rational inquiry into natural phenomena, laying foundations for empirical approaches. Hippocratic tradition, Euclid's geometry, Archimedes' mechanics.
Eratosthenes' measurement of Earth's circumference, Aristarchus' heliocentric model, astounding achievements setting the stage for modern science.
In art and literature, the Homeric epics, tragedy, comedy, lyric poetry, sculpture evolving toward naturalism, architectural orders, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, still inspiring.
Historical consciousness itself owes a profound debt to Herodotus and Thucydides, establishing systematic documentation and rational explanation of the past.
And of course, the modern Olympic Games, re-established in 1896, explicitly linked modern international sports with Hellenic traditions, a direct cultural thread.
The Greek achievement is truly remarkable for emerging from modest beginnings. Without vast resources like Egypt or Mesopotamia, their fragmentation into competitive city-states.
While politically problematic, paradoxically fostered incredible intellectual and artistic experimentation that might have been suppressed under more centralized rule.
The Greek experience, therefore, offers a profound reminder that civilization's most valuable aspects, its ideas, its art, its ways of thinking, can transcend military defeat, political subjugation, or economic decline.
They're a testament to the enduring power of human intellect and creativity.
The fundamental questions posed by the Greeks, what is justice? How should society be governed? What constitutes human excellence? What can we truly know about the cosmos? Remain our questions today, proving their timeless relevance.
So you've seen how ancient Greece, despite its internal divisions and eventual political subjugation, managed to transcend its own physical and political collapse.
This peculiar victory and defeat, where Greek ideas conquered Roman minds and then spread across continents and centuries.
Truly makes us wonder, what kind of legacy are we building today in our own time that might similarly outlast our own political and technological forms, influencing minds for thousands of years to come?
It's a question worth pondering long after this deep dive concludes.